Welcome back to The Rundown, and let's turn back now to U.S. politics and focus on the race for the Democratic presidential nomination in the wake of this week's New Hampshire primary. Now, the contest is still wide open, but the party does seem to be clearly aligned around two camps, with progressives rallying around Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, while moderates have given an early lead to former Mayor Pete Buttigieg. But that picture could well change in the Nevada and South Carolina primaries later this month. Well, joining us from New York now is Emma Vigeland. She is political correspondent for the progressive news site, The Young Turks. Emma, welcome back. First, let me congratulate you. 6 months ago on this program, you said Bernie Sanders would be a front runner and Joe Biden would stumble. But you also said the Democratic center, the moderates, would not have legs, but they do seem for now to have rallied around Pete Buttigieg. I want to get your assessment of the race in the wake of that New Hampshire primary.
Well, good to see you, too, and thanks for having me on. Pete Buttigieg has gone out to a significant lead, but I think it should be noted that the two early states, Iowa and New Hampshire, are two of the whitest states in the entire country. It's something that progressives and other activists have been pointing out for a while, that it really privileges white issues over black, brown, Latino issues in this country, when Iowa and New Hampshire are the central focus of the Democratic primary so early on. And that's advantaged candidates like Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, who poll around 2 or 1% with African-American voters in the United States. And that's going to change when Nevada and South Carolina roll around, because those states are much more diverse, and Nevada specifically is more working class. And I think Buttigieg is going to kind of have a dose of reality there. Well, he may have a dose of reality, but there are other candidates who could come into that place. Let's take a look at the latest Morning Consult poll, which was conducted after the New Hampshire primary. It shows Sanders in the lead with 29%. Biden's support fell 3 points to 19%, leaving him 1 point ahead of former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Now, Sanders' rival, Pete Buttigieg, as we saw, he's trailing at 11%, well back there, as you suggested. But again, we do see Democratic voters looking apparently for some kind of centrist alternative to Bernie Sanders. Let me ask you a question. If it comes down to it, and it comes down to one or the other, Bernie Sanders or a moderate candidate, do you think Bernie Sanders supporters, the ones who say Bernie or bust, would eventually support a centrist nominee, and vice versa? How concerned are you that supporters for a centrist nominee would not support candidate Sanders against Donald Trump?
So I think there's this myth about Bernie or busters. You know, more Bernie Sanders supporters voted for Hillary Clinton proportionally in 2016 in the general election than Hillary Clinton supporters in 2008 voted for President Obama, now President Obama, or was President Obama, against John McCain. So it's just a little overblown in my view. But if the Democratic Party decides to throw their weight behind Michael Bloomberg, who was a Republican most of his life, spoke at the 2004 RNC, has instituted very racist policies here in New York City, like stop and frisk, and just is basically trying to buy his way onto the debate stage, that's the one candidate, the one moderate, but I would say Republican, who could be the Democratic nominee, that I could see a lot of the base just completely turning away from, because that would be the ultimate slap in the face to the Democratic base. Look, the Republican Party, for example, they embrace their base and what their base wants, and the Democratic Party shuns their base. The base, the progressive base of the Democratic Party, is leaning in the Bernie Sanders direction, and because that kind of politics threatens the corporate donations and interests of the Democratic Party that has tried to cling to power for so long, and despite losing over 1,000 seats under President Obama and just failing miserably in leadership, because he threatens that, they're even willing to go so far as to potentially throw their weight behind a Michael Bloomberg, changing the debate rules to allow him onto the stage. I don't think that he's going to be able to stop Bernie Sanders, but when you have someone who has so much money, one of the richest people on planet Earth, who's literally able to just use his pocket change, what we would use for going
going to the grocery store to buy ad after ad after ad. That has an effect, but it's also one of the most dangerous elements of our democracy.
I don't want to just go to another subject, because I'm speaking to you, of course, from our Jaffa studio. Israel has not been a factor in this Democratic primary, and certainly wouldn't be necessary in states like Nevada and Iowa. But moving ahead, when the primary goes to states like New York, it's likely the Israel issue and the positions that Bernie Sanders have somewhat out of the mainstream of most Democratic, certainly Jewish Democratic voters, that may become an issue. How much of a factor do you think that could be for Sanders in states like New York, in Florida, maybe even Illinois, for example?
Well, you know, American Jews are one of the most progressive voting blocs in the entire country. But really what drives the far-right conversation about Israel and Palestine in this country is the right, is the evangelical right that has Donald Trump and Mike Pence and people like and organizations like AIPAC that are on the right behind them. So the voters that would be inclined to vote on that issue specifically are more conservative anyway, and so I don't think that's going to have play any role really if Bernie Sanders is to, you know, take New York, but that's a little bit further down the line in the Democratic primary as well. After Super Tuesday, there's hope that there should be some sort of emergent frontrunner in the Democratic field. Yeah,
so certainly the Democratic Party on both wings will hope that there will be some kind of frontrunner they can rally on after those Super Tuesday primaries. Emma Vigeland of the Young Turks, thank you for joining us on The Rundown.